brilliant. Have a good time. Okay. Yeah. All right. See you later. Take care. Hi, Valerie.
Hi, Nigel. How are you doing?
Oh, good.
Busy as ever, I imagine.
It's yeah. Groundhog Day, Groundhog Day. But I don't know, we must be making progress, mustn't we? So,
Oh, I hope so.
I just seen Jasmine has put something in.
Yes, I was just about to, I've just seen her email. I was just about to have a look and see.
And I discovered a really useful set of documentation, actually, that's going to help us as well. So yeah, that's, you know, still a bit slow, but I mean, I think we're very dependent on the on a bit of modeling input, and then I think we can steam ahead a little bit, is my view. Yeah, let's have a look. What's that?
So this is application of data.
Oh, I've got it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting to see what they use and why.
Yes. So the question is, what are the challenges from that, apart from the fact that there isn't enough?
It's interesting. Yeah, as I say, I'll talk about it a little bit when we see who turns up, but I discovered, you know, the various other assets, the Google Cloud data assets that have been pulled together. RDA have pulled stuff together, but it's not obvious that, well, they may have been using varieties of it in the modeling. It's just interesting. Often this effort to pull stuff together is so immediate that other efforts to kind of integrate data are great in and of themselves, but they're not necessarily being used by the core modeling groups around.
Well,
So,
I guess they start off on what they can get their hands on immediately, and somehow that perpetuates. And you always build on what you're already doing rather than throwing everything up in the air and starting again, because there isn't time.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's good.
Here's Jasmina. Oh, Dennis.
Hi both.
Morning.
Hello.
Hi.
Morning.
Thanks for putting those notes up, Jasmina. That's great. Thank you. And Dennis, thanks for the GPAI thing, which then made me track down the other documents, which I think are really quite helpful to us. So I was going to talk about that a little bit. So that's good.
I will have to leave at 10:30. I apologize. I've been set up an HR meeting, which apparently I can't miss. I don't know what it is.
HR.
So, I apologize.
We all have to dance to HR. Absolutely. It always seems to be
even at these times.
If I dread one kind of email extension coming into my inbox in Oxford, it's the one that is .hr. So there you go.
Well, is this meeting being recorded currently?
This one
yes,
is.
Yes.
But just for our benefit.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, but you will be able to catch up if you want to afterwards.
Yes, yeah. I haven't managed to find out how I catch up. I sort of make my notes as we speak, and then I do my thing. But I will eventually. I think especially when we try to patch it all together.
Yeah, we're threading things together. I think I was very keen to get your input just to know on the ground what data assets were being used, because it's clear that out there are some quite heroic events to pull data together. It's not obvious that they're necessarily being, it's used in a timely way by the modeling community, simply because they've got other things, they've got more urgent things, they really have to rely on the data they can get. And so I think we might touch on that. It's a really interesting challenge. And despite all our the stuff that we've got in this chapter on the principles of FAIR, and indeed the RDA work in that area, it's a huge challenge to get that data out to people. So
yeah, I think I mean, I think one data source that I don't think people knew very much, but Our World in Data really made a big effort to collate everything, and I really think we should put our heads to them and note it.
Yeah, we should. And the other thing, in a link I sent around, an email I sent around last night, there was the report, the 3 reports from the GPAI Data Governance Group. And one of the interesting ones in there is the report from Edinburgh and Trilateral. And they use, although it's about data governance and AI in general, they use the pandemic as one example. And they point out, of course, the COVID-19 open data work that's hosted by Google on GitHub. Now, that's some of the best normalized data that you can find, I think. But I think it's been, again, that was put together over time, and I'm not sure that it's as widely, I mean, the people building on it, but I'm not sure that it's as widely used as we might expect. And I think it might be helpful, you know, in our chapter, to be promoting these efforts where the data is being architected as we speak. And if it's not useful or wasn't used at the outset, it could be useful in future for sure. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing to note is that there was a big collaboration from the very onset, also supported by Microsoft and GitHub, to sort of get the models put in a formulated open source way, and that's still ongoing. So I had a conversation with them because my model is now, I mean, it has always been cataloged. I call it my model. It's not really my model. It's a model developed by a huge group of people. But that model was always, our first and foremost thing was open source. Anyone can download, anyone can replicate the results. And I think that wasn't always the case.
No, it certainly wasn't. No, I mean,
because
it certainly wasn't.
Yeah, sorry.
It certainly wasn't.
Data were not available, or the code was not available, but never both, really. That's the thing.
True. Yeah, so we can call out those real developments, and I think using Docker, GitHub models has been one of the real standouts, I think, in data exploitation. You know, I think with the Trilateral report, the GPI also has quite a good framework around how data fits into life cycles and some of the impediments there. As Dennis pointed out, lots of people are noting that you always come back, actually, not always to technical challenges, but technical challenges in law and ethics. You know, people get very, very nervous about that. But
what do you think about the Turing Institute efforts to sort of do that? I think they've been doing a lot of efforts. I don't know how much output there is.
See, that's an interesting point. I'd welcome people's views on that. I mean, I think they have been doing a lot, and they're convening workshops and mini conferences and looking. I think people involved in the Turing effort have been putting out other stuff. So you can see that again in some of the GPAI work, OECD supported work. But if I look at the actual output, it seems to me that, you know, GitHub repositories are a good test of whether or not there is accessible, available intercepts into some of these assets. And I don't know that the Turing have produced outputs of that sort, have they? Does anybody know? I don't think they have. Our World in Data, I mean, that's a group, of course, that's becoming, I mean, I think they've been quite a success story, and I think that group has been looking to recruit new full stack software developers to kind of improve their curation and management of data. And of course,
they impressed me from the very onset, because you know, when there was no data available, they were putting 3 points on a line, 2 points on a line, and they're just trying to make sense of whatever they could find.
Yeah.
I put the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine because at the beginning they were really collating results. I haven't really followed them more recently. You might know more about that, also sort of in Oxford, Nigel.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and I think there's, again, I think people have been so busy under the immediate requirements of the pandemic that sitting back and being able to architect and clean up data delivery has been a bit of a challenge. But I mean, the work there around efficacy as well has been starting to get to the view that it needs to worry about sustainability going forward, as well as just solving immediate problems. I mean, I think that's one of the things, is how efforts in this area can mature to get to a steady state. It's a bit like the surveillance challenge, isn't it? Sorry, Ben, hi, and Glenn, welcome.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks we didn't meet last week, I know. So I can see there's been a reasonable amount of effort on other chapters. Perhaps Dennis and Valerie, before we get into ours, could you perhaps, are you aware of where we might be able to pull information from? In fact, I know estimation and modeling were the two. Are there other areas we should be paying attention to in that material?
Oh, I suppose the only other obvious one might be the policy one. Is there anything much in policy, Dennis, that?
Yeah, that's quite extensive now. I was looking through.
Yes, that one's just about, we've just about got a complete first draft on that. So that's probably the one that's furthest ahead. I'm trying to remember what was in there in terms of, can anybody else help? Dennis, Ben, do you?
Just trying to think if it's.
I mean, there wouldn't have been much on data, but.
No. No, I don't think there is much on data in there, really.
Well, that would be an interesting thing to perhaps forward reflect on, that any policy is going to need to kind of reflect on data. Yeah.
I mean, Nigel, if you want to read it, if you want to read through the policy draft and suggest where we ought to be mentioning data, please do.
Okay.
I mean, with the policy one, the idea, I think now, pretty much now, this week, is to send it to a few people. Frank Kelly, Bernard Silverman, a few other people who've been involved in policy, interacting with governments and so on, for comment, to find out whether there are areas that we've missed. But it sounds if maybe data is one that we ought to have in there a bit more.
Okay, well that's a good pointer. I'll make a note of that.
Amount, by the way, I've just checked, and in
Sorry?
the 6 point, there is a small amount in 6.1 on data, but it's not very.
It's
very
not
detailed.
much, is it? No, I don't remember anything much. Thanks, Ben. So.
Great.
And it suggests cross-referencing to this paper as well. So.
Okay, well, we'll make sure we do that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just making some notes here. Chapter on policy cross-reference.
Yeah. So
perhaps we
so
could just
bit in policy and a bit in modelling, but not huge amounts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, perhaps if we could just carry on then. I mean, the contributions that we've had, just to reflect on them, on modelling life cycles, on Jasmine's stuff. We just carry on through Jasmine's observations and notes. So there is this issue about where we have been pulling data sources from. And as I say, that's covered in the trilateral report. If you've not seen the GitHub cloud COVID-19 data, it's you aware of that work? So it's, let me just share my screen here and just show you if I can find it. Yeah. Sorry, give me a second. Should be more organized for this. It's going to do my, you're going to see my whole messy but desktop for a minute. Just let me bring
Make things look better.
yeah. So this is the the GitHub Google Cloud Platform. Can you see that? Yeah.
Mhm.
And you'll see that the repository has allegedly 20,000 distinct locations around the world with quite fine-grained spatial resolution and geographic resolution. And then they have a pretty well-organized set of data assets from death cases, recoveries, tests. So, you know, I think what they've worked quite hard to do here is devise a set of keys that link the data together, and it's in very quite cleaned up CSV formats that you can then pull down on. And they've built a reasonable set of tools off the back, or the community is building a reasonable set of tools off the back of it. And I think that's nice. I guess, Jasmina, I mean, has this asset been used very much by the modeling community in the UK, as far as you know?
As far as I know, I think everyone uses their own data sources, and they're doing they're doing a model that requires certain data sources, and they use data sources. I don't know if there's an overlap between what they use and what is here, but I wouldn't say specifically they dive into this to get the data.
Yeah. And I think the effort here is collectively to produce a really well documented and curated set of data assets. And so I think that's fascinating to appreciate, and whether one can actually, one part of the chapter, I think, would be to call out these kinds of efforts and illustrate them. The other effort that's interesting is the RDA work, which is very much based on these FAIR principles around sharing data, but is essentially, when you get into it, it's quite a rigmarole to get yourself accredited to begin to use it. So what it isn't is direct taps in, but it has some resemblances to the work that Ben Goldacre is doing, in the sense that you don't have to take the data out of some of the enclaves where the data lives to be able to model and use it, and you send your models into the kind of but I don't know how successful that's been in the community. Has anybody heard use or exploitation of that? And I think, if I was to be brutally honest, I think what's happening here is that the data community is responding to the pandemic by trying to put these principles up there and organize and curate data assets in pretty decent ways, things that are very consistent with what we've been saying in the paper. But the disconnect is between the modelers, who have got immediate things they need to be doing, and their own data assets are just, there's too much going on for this join up to have happened. So the ecosystem, which Jenny Tennyson and people talk about in the general framework paper from the GPAI, that just isn't joined up at the moment. And of course, that gives us something quite interesting to say, I would contest. I think that's...
Nigel, is that something one could reasonably be optimistic about for the future? You know, in that what's happened here is sorry, I'll come out.
I was going to say, I think I definitely would agree that there is a disconnect, especially in sort of the modeling the modeling circles I know, and it's again, I think this is something that should be said, because for example, another thing is some people have more data available to them at that moment than other people have at that moment, and maybe 10 days later everyone has the same data set, but there is this sort of intrinsic thing of, you've got the vaccination data, I don't have the vaccination data. You go and run the model, oh, I've got the first results. And I don't think that necessarily benefits anybody. There'll be a much bigger benefit in doing things simultaneously. The SPI-M umbrella, in theory, should be working in sort of a set of models with set of questions, etc. I think so. The vaccination data, even that was difficult to get to SPI-M, and it only got later than anticipated. So definitely, we should talk about that disconnect and lessons learned for future.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say, before I got that phone call, that I feel one might be optimistic here, because in the current pandemic, you've had a community of modelers who are used to getting their own data and dealing with their own sort of established data sources or whatever. And suddenly you're offering them all sorts of better choices and wider choices at a time when they're caught up in the pandemic and they just don't have time to stop and think about that. Whereas, so it seems, I don't know if we're already making that, but shouldn't the point be that anticipating future pandemics, what we want to do is to get a community of modelers who are used to the idea of taking in new sets of data, of not just always working with a standardly formatted data that they sort of are used to. But
yeah, no, I think that would be. I think you're right.
They need to be much more flexible, and that's something that won't happen overnight. But in terms of working to prevent future pandemics, is surely something that could be improved.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Richard and Ruth. Sorry, it's great to see you on the call. We're just doing it. We meet and we're doing these resumes of where we've gotten to, and of course, as ever, we're all busy doing our other things, and so trying to get enough time carved out to make progress here. But we've actually begun to get quite a useful set of resources and understanding of the data provisioning landscape out there. I was just talking about the report from Informatics at Edinburgh and Trilateral that identified things like the Google Cloud COVID-19 data sets. There was stuff that the RDA is doing, and there's what everybody else is routinely drawing down on. We've been talking about, Jasmine has been talking about the kind of typical way in which the modelers have been pulling down data, and we've just been talking about how we can improve that data ecosystem. Ben's been thinking about, and Glenn been thinking about life cycles. You very much got a perspective on platforms, and we'd be very keen to see, I don't know whether you've had a chance to look at the various structures of the chapter as it's emerging, where you think you might be able to contribute into. How have you got? I think Jasmine has got to go off the call at 10:30. So if you just bear with me, can I just kind of close out on the discussion around Jasmina's stuff? Yeah, okay. And Ruth, similarly, we'll get back if you can just bear with us. So that's great, Jasmine. I mean, and then you point out about the issue of even where there's scarce modeling. I guess, again, to the point that Dennis has just made, I mean, if we can partly use this chapter to just highlight the opportunity to stitch together a higher quality data infrastructure, that'd be partly the important feature of the chapter, right?
Yeah. I'm making some notes on what you're saying that I will integrate within different parts here.
Yeah. And then you make the point, of course, that different types of models have different data demands. Some are going to require, if you like, less authentic behavioral data, perhaps, than agent-based models, or for example, or whatever. Yeah, that was something we talked about. Those SEER and branching models. I mean, just to ask you on that, do you see those model types evolving to the point at which they are going to want to try and approximate new important factors that capture some of the social features, or is this really still about fundamental transmission, parameterization, et cetera?
For me, it's the latter. I think it still is about transmission and understanding sort of how that fits how it gives the distributions that you put into the models later on, I think. But there are people who are just using branching models to characterize R and trying to just count, in a sense, that. I think they're too simplistic for the purposes of what we want to do, and should be a part of a larger model. That's kind of my take on that.
Thank you.
And it's misspelled. It should be. There's an extra S there. Sorry.
Yeah, yes, don't worry. Okay. Yep. And the other thing we talked about a little bit when we last met was obviously the interest, a sudden interest around lineages and data about within host variation, as well as just simple I mean, that's just an extraordinarily complicated area, I know, but we're going to see, I imagine. I was very impressed to see just how well curated the UK genomic data is, of course. I mean, perhaps we should be surprised, but I mean, it's there.
Can I ask you, Nigel, do you have links with Christoph Fraser's group in Oxford?
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I mean, links as in we talk occasionally. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, because so I am also speaking to them on different levels. And the last conversation we had, Will Probert is going to try and collate sort of, or find the source for the time series of the different variants. So something like that would be really useful, both for just understanding where we are in the epidemic and understanding what we need to put in the model when we are modeling multivariants, right? So yeah. I think there will be a scope to add more to this part about the usefulness on the ground as I do this modeling with that data, depending when this paper is going to appear. But I think I'll continue talking to them, and if you
could do that and just splice that into the document as well to remind us that there's that connection point, and they've got that ambition to try and get. The other thing, of course, is the recent publication of the stuff on contact tracing and the data on apparent reductions in transmission there. I don't know whether that is something that we should certainly mention it. I mean, the data on that, of course, that comes with all sorts of frighteners around how you can use and reuse that. But that was just, wasn't it, being talked about in the last couple of days?
I think I will put that. I was planning to put that when I mentioned NHS app and Isle of Wight, so they evaluated that, and then following on to that, it was a contact tracing, more recent stuff, and they also have a paper on the ethical grounds of collecting data and using it. So we can quote those things in there as well. And I think it would be actually useful to have somebody like either Rob Hinch or Will as part of this paper, but maybe send them a draft and see what they can contribute later on. Valerie, Dennis, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I suspect they're too busy to join the group as a regular thing.
No, I mean, I think it's a matter of trying to intercept material they might be generating anyway that would be relevant to us, and I think our job is a curational one partly. I think, that's great. Well, that's very helpful. Perhaps we might just come on to then, in that case, and I put a little write-up of the Open Safely project principles in the Dropbox for last week, and again, I think that's interesting style of trying to make data available. That's probably going to be quite a successful template for certain classes of data. I mean, then the question is how you link any of that up with the more public-facing stuff. Yeah.
So just to make a note on that, Nigel. So Ben, surname I think it's Goldacre.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he gave a talk within the SPIAM group about the possibility of using Open Safely, etc. And I think prior to that, some of the groups, notably Thomas House and Lorenzo Pellis at Manchester, I think they have actually used the data to do some analysis. So I think example, and I don't know if that's published or not, but we can check.
They are published. Oh, they're published, and I think I chair his steering board for Open Safely, so I know what they're doing. I think it's just that part of the challenge is how you can go beyond what's inherent in the analytics you can do on the linked patient data. But I mean, I think it's a great example. It's a very good example. Yeah, Bristol have done some work. Imperial, I know, using their problem is getting enough data scientists who are able to kind of stand up analysis against the software platform. And I think that will come back to a fundamental challenge, which is around training for data analysts that goes beyond modeling expertise and into the whole issue of being able to use a reasonably complex API or model.
But it's also, I mean, it doesn't have to be one person. That's the point. It can be two people. It can be a data scientist that collates, curates the data, puts it in a format that the model is used to. Because I think there's that non-familiarity with a data set when you are faced to it, to somebody who's been modeling in a certain way for 20 years and then suddenly has to change the way they're doing. So an in-between data science person may be the way forward, and training that group of data scientists is kind of the future of what we constantly talk about, data science, data analytics, etc.
So will you enhance or add into the current document then, Jasmina, just to capture your thoughts from today? That would be good.
Yes.
Yep.
I will do that. And what I can do then is sort of, do you want me to expand into paragraphs with examples?
Yeah,
or leave it
I think we need to be providing some text around these themes now. Yeah.
Okay, I'll start working on that for next week. I can promise it'll be all done for next week.
No,
but I'll
but
start working on it.
Fantastic. Yeah, because you've got to drop off the call now. I know.
I'll drop off the call, and then if that meeting finishes quickly, I'll come back.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yes,
Bye.
Jasmine.
Good luck with HR.
Thanks.
Richard, do give us a sense of, I don't know, we've got a chapter outline here, and we've got clearly an interest in platform centered through life cycle kind of modeling efforts. I don't know, it'd be really good to hear about experience today, or where you would take the presentation you gave us back at the end of last year through into a contribution into this chapter. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Glenn did forward a link to something on Dropbox a few weeks ago, but it seems to be broken. So I haven't actually, at least I couldn't see anything. So I haven't actually looked at the chapter outline. But
chat now for you, so you can at least see it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, conceptually, not a huge amount has changed since the discussion in September. We had a very, very long, drawn-out process with the funding councils for the rapid response call, desperately inappropriately named, that eventually resulted in the platform being funded just the beginning of this year. So things were moving along pretty slowly between September and January, whilst we waited to hear whether or not STFC in the end would fund it. I think from our perspective, we've always been thinking a little bit about the next pandemic rather than the current one, because I mean, you know, the EPIC group within our consortium, you know, perfectly well aware of how much fun it is to have people second guessing all of your decisions in real time, and so you know, we've been thinking about this platform, and I'm sure this stuff's already covered in the document, but we've been thinking about this platform from the point of view of, you know, in 2001 with the FMD epidemic, you know, what got set up after that so that we were ready for the 2007 outbreak and so on, you know, and what do we think needs to be in place ready for next time, rather than this real-time data set exists and people aren't using it because they're in too much of a hurry right now. It's what do we want to get into place so that the modeling community can think about using this and setting up their systems around using it in a really straightforward way. And I think I might disagree slightly, if I understood correctly, what was just being said about wanting to have a data scientist kind of interject, or a research software engineer or something interject into the process, so that they always have to kind of act as a shim between the data coming in and the modelers doing the work. That what we've been trying to do is to make the APIs into this platform so simple that even modelers like us can use them. And so, I mean, that's been behind a lot of our thinking. And I mean, watching Ben Goldacre talk about his stuff at the meeting that I talked at as well, that you ran, you know, that sounded, oh, great. That looks like a more plausible link. I'd be really interested to see how easy that is in practice, because it did worry me that was something that it looks like a fantastic idea and it absolutely should have been supported. And I was really boggled by the fact that he said that nobody was funding it. but it did look like a lot of hard work on the modeling.
And he's awash with funds, you'll be glad to know now.
Oh, good. Right. Okay.
He's actually, his problem is getting enough people recruited. I mean, they've done some quite important stuff, which is getting published out there in Lancet and Nature. So he's now, I think they're now, but his problem is onboarding. You're exactly right. More groups who can use it, because there's a tariff. There's an overhead in getting familiar enough about how you assemble your models, how you then test them against the dummy data, and then how you submit them. I mean, it's not impossible at all, and it's as good as it's gotten. It's very well documented. But yeah, their challenge is getting more groups in a position where they can use this stuff. So I think that's going to be definitely something we'd want to address without being too kind of dewy-eyed about it when we talk about this in the paper. Yeah, so I've just shared the link with you, and there is some stuff in there that describes the structure of the chapter so far, and we're basically kind of organizing into a set of sub parts of the chapter, and one of them is around platforms, essentially. And so, and to your point, I think Dennis and Valerie, this is about writing something that's useful for the future and for ongoing, for example, surveillance work or response work. So yeah, I think it's trying to lessons from the past, certainly, but as they will inform the future, I think is what we would like it to be.
Yeah, I mean, we had a really useful conversation with ONS before Christmas about how we might set up our data registry and the provenance tracing and stuff inside ONS's Safe Haven. And that seemed like a really promising approach. And one of the things we're trying to do that's just kind of moving on incrementally from what we were talking about in September was basically how we could run entire registries kind of offline inside Safe Havens and things like that, so that the tracing could happen in real time whilst we're doing analyses, rather than what we were thinking about before, which was basically dumping log files in the Safe Havens and then exporting them and pushing them to the registry afterwards. Unfortunately, NIHR decided not to fund that. But so we're going to have to see what we can do to keep up that link with ONS.
But anything you could cut and paste of that sort, because that's a great way to illustrate what you're doing, would really help. And we're just trying to, literally, we're a bit magpie-ish at the moment. We're assembling the bits we think we know, the glittering objects of interest, and then we're going to try and put the narrative around it in the next few.
So I added a paragraph to the data pipeline, to the platforms section to sort of at least begin this process. I thought Richard wasn't going to make it today, so I thought I would add something in. But
thank you very much. Yeah.
Essentially, it's trying to make the point that Open Safely is not the full story. I think.
No, of course.
And that we need tools that will allow us to link sort of data, across data sets and platforms and so on, which I think is what we're trying to do. Well, what Richard is coordinating in.
Yeah, and Richard, I'm just looking at that paragraph now. It's in chapter 8, data platforms, Open Safely plus data pipeline. I mean, there's kind of, Richard can expand on the technical aspects and challenges posed in constructing such a system. I mean, again, actually, it's getting people to buy in to allow you to do some of this. You're quite right, isn't it? It's not just about that.
Yeah, I mean, the good news from that point of view is that ONS did seem very keen on it, and they've actually appointed somebody who started on the 1st of January to work on provenance of model outputs running inside their Safe Haven. So
that would be a great contact to throw our way as well.
Yeah. So we don't know exactly who that is. I know that, the people we were talking to had just hired her, and we would have been working with her if the NIHR grant had gone ahead. But now we're settling down in the STFC grant, where we're hoping to reopen those links and start to think about how we can get that all working. So we're definitely planning on talking with her.
So if you could perhaps just cast an eye over some of the material and just think where you'd like to add your observations and where the impediments might be, and there's no one single solution to all of this. It's partly again about engineering the right kind of ecosystem, to use an overused phrase, but it is about that. Yeah.
Just as a complete aside, the reason why I haven't been here, I think Glenn may have said, is that that all of my teaching for the entire year is January and February. And so until the end of February, I'm really not hugely available. And then I've become a nice, relaxed bunny who can engage in other things again.
Okay,
so
great. We're just going to get you invited onto the Dropbox so that you'll have automatic access. Ruth, anything you want to throw into this as you've been listening to our kind of perorations?
No, today I'm a bit of a lurker, just to hear what's going on, and I'm happy to support the work that Richard and Glenn are doing, and if there's anything else that I can think of and come to.
Right. Really from the platform point of view, we talked a little bit earlier, and again for Richard's point about efforts to curate data assets, and I think the ONS is going to be looking at this. We've got our world in data. We've got the Google COVID-19 data assets. We've got the Research Data Alliance, who's been trying to pull stuff together, but that's a bit open safely light, but it seems to be behind all sorts of bureaucratic permissioning, which is a bit ironic given they're trying to support open science principles. You know, but from the platform point of view, it would be really good to get a sense of how the community, the platform, has been responding to developing, you know, through life cycle solutions. So, I mean, you know, you talked about that again in the meeting before the end of the year about you know, everything from people blogging about where decent ontologies are or the challenges of controlled vocabularies through to software suites of various sorts. Is there anywhere else in the UK that is kind of cutting a blaze on this? We've talked about your work and Ben's. Richard, I guess I'm asking you.
Oh, right. Other people doing it, not that I'm really, not that I'm really aware of. No, I mean yeah, not from a kind of framework perspective.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? What we've got is lots of modelers, and not say lots, but we've got modelers who are busy with their own assets, trying to do the best they can. But the frameworks at their disposal are often code sets that they've built themselves, you know. And
yeah. Oh well, I should say, sorry, I'm not. I did discover that Imperial have an entirely private data tracing platform that they aren't sharing, and they strip out of everything that they put on GitHub. And I've got no idea what it is. It's just that I was talking to one of the lead RSEs there, and he just said, "Oh yeah, no, we kind of do this already, but we just don't expose it to anybody, so nobody knows what's going on." So it's kind of I'm not entirely sure what I think about an entirely secret data tracing platform.
Wow.
But that is apparently out there in some form or other. So I don't know whether we want to refer to that or not, since they seem to be making pains to make sure we don't know about it.
Also, Ruth, I did actually think you and Ian could maybe contribute where, you know, that some of the ideas that you've been trying to put together in terms of not you know, actually assessing the quality of the data and the suitability, because it seems to me that's, you know, that the traceability is the first element, but the second element is, well, what are you tracing, and you know how that gets built in, and I think that can probably go in a few places in the paper. One of them I think one of them I think is in the skills section, which I don't think we've got much in at the moment.
Okay, I'd certainly just today in this meeting I had a really quick look at the structure of the paper, and there is something about a kind of like 5-star system of data, and that's kind of along the lines of that Ian and I were thinking of anyway, but what we've written about it, we can certainly add to that. And if you think it goes in skills, and I can have a look now at the paper structure and see where it goes, and I can discuss that with Ian, because I think that would be really useful. As you say, it's not just about you can trace the data, but are you tracing something that someone found on their napkin in a pub one time, or is it something that, you know, is ONS data collected and, you know, collected really well and really nicely?
Yeah. And I also I did also point people, Richard, to this report from Edinburgh and Trilateral on data for AI systems, essentially. It's part of the GPAI effort, a global partnership in AI, OECD thing, and they've got a number of groups working on this. The one, AI in the pandemic response, has really not produced anything very substantial at all, but the one from data governance, which Jenny Tennyson co-chairs, has produced quite a nice framework. I sent that around in the email last night. Let me just recopy that here. And they had this paper. They commissioned a paper from Trilateral and Edinburgh on data and AI issues, and they talk about the data engineering principles that Bruce has been alluding to, quality, metadata, and that is there in our framework. And they, I say, do point out to some of these data assets that have been used in the effort to date, or well, have been promoted, not necessarily used. That's the irony. I mean, you can put a lot of work in data curation and then still have a community who might be able to benefit from it, unaware of it, or disinclined to use it, or it's not fit for some purpose they have. Yeah. Let me just get that.
I think that's the really big issue. Is that was kind of, you know, learned from 2001 was that you can't do these things on the fly. And that's why it's never really bothered me that none of this stuff's being taken up now. You know, because it's something that has to be done in peacetime, and building all of this infrastructure around data curation and common sources of data and things, so that when you get into into a new pandemic, then people are just familiar with the tools, they're familiar with the people that they're going to be working with, and all this kind of stuff, you know, which is obviously happening as far from the kind of SPI-M side, but we never got as far as, you know, nobody ever got as far as how the data would be managed, which seems to be pretty clear from the discussions that we've had. So yeah.
Richard, if you just have a chance to glance over what we have in terms of the structure and proposals, and just drop in any major starred emissions or those kinds of observations, I mean, as reminders to ourselves, that would be really helpful. I mean,
yeah, sure. I can read this document now. I don't have edit access. I don't know who needs to give me that, or at least I don't seem to have edit access. I can just download download a folder of documents.
Well, we're at the moment, the issue of collaborative authoring is an interesting one. It depends what your preferred kind of document generation is. I spend my life in Overleaf, which is collaborative LaTeX, but I don't think a lot of people are using. I don't think that's the preferred.
I mean, I'm completely happy with Overleaf, but I do use it, but I'm not. And
we've not tended to be using Google Doc as well. But I mean, again, that's the other place where you can end up collaborating quite effectively. Dennis, what's working? Or
just to say that the only problem I've had with Overleaf is sort of using accounts of or whatever. I mean, the simple old-fashioned way to do it in LaTeX is to have a LaTeX master document. So to have LaTeX files in the Dropbox, one for each section. And then just have a master document that sticks them together by saying include or whatever. Then people can edit their own section and recompile the whole thing to see what it looks like with their section.
Look, I wasn't trying to impose LaTeX on people. I'm quite happy to revert to a Google Doc. It is about account management. You're right.
I think Rich is really just asking for access to the Dropbox.
Oh, sorry. Have you not got?
Yeah, I can read the Dropbox, but I don't seem to be able to edit anything. I can just download the folder.
Richard, you weren't a member of it. I don't think you've ever been sent more than a link, so that would have explained.
No, absolutely. That's all I'm saying. That was all I meant when I started this.
I've just sent you and Ruth the invitations both to that and the Slack channel in case we want to use that.
Right,
so,
brilliant.
Hopefully that sends you an email telling you you've got it, and if you have any problem, let me know. But
yeah, no, I've just got that link. That's perfect.
Okay, that's great. Okay, yeah. Look, I don't want to be an imperialist about what collaboration tools you use. And actually, looking in the Dropbox, seems most people are just staying with Word and making local updates and then recommitting it using the kind of Dropbox infrastructure such as it is. So it's just
we did try for one or two of them using things like Overleaf, but I guess because we're not really writing mathematics, the benefits of LaTeX aren't there. And we found everybody, it was very hard to, everybody was sort of overwriting everything else. Right. And we seem to get on better with the simpler.
I mean, the benefit, the very simple benefit of the LaTeX here, just plain LaTeX here, is being able to edit your own bit and then see how it looks in the context of the whole thing.
Yeah.
At the moment, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a word of doing that. I feel there ought to be a sort of simple instruction you can say, which, there are files called, whatever it is, 8.1 to 8.8, just concatenate the lot and show me them all in one document.
I think that may be wishful thinking about
that is wishful thinking. And even the version in 365 is pretty hopeless that alleges to be sharing. Look, I mean, there aren't many places that have got this right. Let's just stick with basic information dissemination. I think I'll get frustrated enough at some stage that I might generate a local variant in text. I mean, I know that it's not just the maths and the typesetting, it's the bloody bibliography management. I mean, that's the thing that really.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's true.
Don't get me going.
I think what we found with the other ones is that as you're developing a paper, it's easier to have a separate Word file for each section. And then there comes a point where things are relatively stable, where you stick them all together in one. And maybe at that point you face up to things like sticking in the references correctly and all that.
Okay. Ben and Glenn, Ben, was there anything that you wanted to add, draw our attention to, or hope we might be able to get done between now and next week? Because what we have now is a bit of a core group who are getting a little bit more. It was important we get the modelers into the conversation, and Jasmina's taking some of her time to do that, which we really appreciate. Anything to add, Ben?
No, not particularly. So I think with my section, I was just going to go and try and add a bit more detail and specific examples, because at the moment it's a little bit sort of general. So I'll try and work on that.
If we look at the sections we've got notional responsibility for, and there are one or two that are floating around without individuals to pin down on them, getting the perspective from Richard and Ruth would be really helpful. Jasmine is going to be expanding hers. I'm going to be bringing in a number of observations that I think are consistent with ours from the RDA effort and the data curation efforts that you're seeing described in that trilateral paper. I would suggest it's quite it's quite long, but you can skip a lot of it. You'll see that it's very consistent with the data engineering principles we've been talking about anyway. So I think it's engineering. From an engineering point of view, it's assimilable.
I added a paragraph to the data model lifecycle, and cool. which I kind of see as a sort of overarching kind of thing, which relate.
Tell us about that. So
it's at the start. It basically talks about developing approaches and accepted standards. So it's kind of like the open epidemiology kind of idea that we've been thinking about in the SCRC, but I've kind of tried to make it more generic than that. But I think it.
And you put that in the data engineer. Where do you put that?
I put that in the life cycle, the data model and life cycle.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah. Oh yes, I see that now. Yeah.
But it may not be the right place for it. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm obviously open to.
Yeah. Open epidemiology. Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, that whole push there. And we haven't said very much about the 400,000 odd articles that are now available, that are still available from the literature sharing project that was meant to be providing all sorts of input for lots of clever AI and NLP. But I mean, I don't know whether that's been used as an asset has that been used as an asset at all in any of the modeling or the INI IDP discussions, Valerie? Or because I can imagine it's a huge challenge just staying abreast of the rapidly
I don't really know what people in general are doing. I mean, I think many people are sort of trying to keep an eye on the RAMP forum papers and things, or at least they were early on. I don't know whether they are still doing that. That I think initially was geared at trying to provide a way of funneling all this mass of papers into something that was usable. But I don't know really whether the people doing the data analyses actually found that to be useful, or whether after a while they were just using their own networks.
I know there was a few initiatives as well. Cochrane collaboration had a like sort of updating meta-analyses, but they were more kind of trials of, I think, of treatments and things, rather than about the kind of epidemiology of the epidemic, if you like. So it wasn't really looking at, you know, what's happening to our numbers or what's happening to different infectious groups and transmission. It was more about what's happening to treatments and how treatments are, you know, more treatments are coming on board and whether they're effective or not. But there was a few places that were trying to curate the literature in some way. But again, I don't know how many are being used, because they're not necessarily doing the kind of epidemiological inputs that I think the modelers would need. It's more at the other end in terms of treatments.
Great. Okay. Well, I mean, we're coming up to the top of that. If I might ask, just looking at the data challenges, our chapter structure again, we're making some progress, I think, on the data engineering perspectives. I can continue to enrich that. Anybody looks at that might want to throw in any perspectives on that. The data model and life cycles, we've heard there's some additions to that. I think if Richard and others could just check that out, that would be excellent. The data institutions, that's not, again, that's something I know where to pull in information, so I'll endeavor to put something in place for next time we meet. Data platforms, then, Richard, again, if you could perhaps just take a look at that and the observations you've been making today, just drop that into the chapter 8. It's currently called Data Platforms Open Safely Plus, but I mean, that is very much a plus. So do add in the perspective that you think is relevant there. Yeah.
Nigel, on the data institutions, I spoke to Ian McKendrick, he's also part of the SCRC, and he wrote something. I was hoping he was going to come today, but he couldn't make it. But he wrote something about EPIC, the sort of animal health centre of expertise in Scotland, and I wondered whether it would be worth, you know, whether that's of interest, basically.
I think any institutions that have been set up and are proving valuable are. I mean, there's quite a lot of discussion around what it would be nice to have and why we need them, but there's still, you know, you can pointing to examples where there are actual institutions set up with rules of governance, with stewardship explicitly written in some cases, trust, you know, that would be great. Yeah, thank you. If you could. We don't have even a starter for that except within the chapter template. So do feel free to just initiate that. Or if you go in there and see one that I may have started, that would be good.
Great. Okay.
And then because I think if we can just start to get a little bit more meat in the sections, we will suddenly find ourselves with plenty of material. Nobody's talking about data skills particularly, although we knew that would be an ongoing challenge.
As I mentioned, I thought Ian and Ruth could cover that, and we did speak to Alice Brett, who's part of the data pipeline grant. He's a kind of, I can't remember, she's head of the. You're muted, Richard. You're muted, Richard.
Yeah, sorry. Alice was head of the Society of Research, the president of the Society of Research Software Engineers until this year, and so she's got a lot of experience in this stuff. And she's the lead RSE for UKAEA. And so from that perspective, they actually, sorry, I was saying we don't have knowledge of other data pipelines. Obviously there are loads of data pipelines out there, they're just not pandemic related. So they run a robust and well-validated data pipeline inside UKAEA for their fusion data. And we've been leaning a lot on their expertise, obviously.
Look, I mean, I think where we've got great best practice in other areas, that's exactly what you'd be pointing out. To. I don't think we believe that this is a,
yeah. One of the real disadvantages we have over them, talking to them about how they have everything set up, is that they have a small number of very well identified data sources that they know exactly what format everything is. They know exactly how good or quality the data is and all this kind of stuff. Whereas we're dealing with this kind of scattergun of nightmarish odds and sods of tiny bits of data that we're piecing together using, you know, magnifying glasses and sellotape. And so it does require a kind of different approach in terms of how to bring the data together.
Absolutely.
But you know, it's still been very useful to talk to them about it.
That's a point you make. Yeah, I mean, when I talk to people in particle physics about how they manage these massive tiered high-end computing solutions, their data is, I mean, they know where it's coming from. It's also not very complex in terms of the attributes they've got to worry about. So, but they're really good insights nevertheless. I mean, where we can draw them. Yeah. So data. I'm just keen if we're able, I mean, it would be wonderful if, I don't know, I know people have got diary constraints, but if we could kind of meet again in a week, try and throw some additional stuff in there. This core group is capable of making the chapter a reality, I think, at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to be able to do very little before this time next week, but I will be able to make the meeting. But I will try and have a look.
Even if it's literally annotated capital letters, this point to be expanded. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Where I am at the moment. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. Dennis, Valerie, thank you for keeping the all-seeing eye on all of this. We're kind of keen to try and get some substantial additional content over the next month, really. Otherwise, I think
going back to your question at the beginning about what was going on in the other chapters, I think, although there are mentions, and obviously Jasmina has brought some of what was going on in chapter 6 into what she's written here. I mean, basically we've been saying there's a data chapter, they'll deal with that. So I think there's relatively little in detail. Well, there's certainly nothing in detail going on, because I think the assumption is that, you know, they might talk about what sort of specific types of data are needed to inform particular models, but in terms of the sort of structures and creation and all the rest of it, that was very much the
I love Richard's framing of this, which is that these infrastructures kind of partly have to be built in peacetime, or at least when things are as frantic as they currently are, if you're going to make a real difference. And they require a lot of investment, and often it's very, very unattractive when you're making these pitches to research councils, as opposed to other things they're being asked to do.
I do think that, I mean, obviously the argument has to be won, but I think that the lesson of 2001 from the kind of EPIC perspective, although I was only very peripherally involved in EPIC and I'm not any longer, but it's just that, you know, post 2001, the government agreed to fund these standing armies of modelers, but it was always like, no, we don't have quite, you know, you can choose, you can have an epidemiologist, or you can have an RSE, or you can have a data person, and it's like, well, we need the epidemiologist. And so, you know, after this, then the argument is going to be, well, we need to expand this, but we don't just need to expand numbers, we need to expand the skill sets.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's a great observation to end on, and we need to capture that, frame it. Okay. All right, well, let's meet next week. Okay, thank you ever so much.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.